Yes, thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. One of the best things about my job is the people I get to meet and the places I get to visit. Today I have the very pleasant task of talking about 3 South Australian organisations I've had the privilege of visiting in the past few months. And as well as doing fascinating work, they left me feeling optimistic about the decency and strength of civil society in Australia, and I believe we're all enriched by that. Let me tell you first of all about Theberton Senior College. It's tucked away in Adelaide's western suburbs, where it's a beacon of hope for many people. Students aged between 16 and 60 come to this special place from far and wide, literally, hailing from 30 different countries at the last count, as well as locally. Theberton is a case study in inclusiveness, peace and harmony. Whether they want to obtain the South Australian Certificate of Education, the SACE, complete a vocational or other tertiary pathway, or attend school for the first time ever and learn English, Theberton has a commitment to lifelong learning in an environment of cooperation, peace and harmony. When you visit Theberton Senior College, and I had the privilege of doing that recently, you quickly see that community and respect for others is at the absolute centre of what the place is about. In the library, I saw a young woman in a hijab working beside a middle-aged man from China. And in the yards, I saw clusters of students in traditional dress and from a variety of cultural backgrounds laughing and talking together. Peace is also an ever-present ethic in this school, with paper crane mobiles hung in the corridors and signs featuring doves and other peaceful imagery on classroom doors. And it's, of course, a very important concept for students who've often experienced conflict, violence and trauma before making their way to the haven that they see that Australia is. In 2007, Theberton Senior College became the first secondary school in Australia to become a United Nations Global Peace School, and so learning about human rights, peace building and restorative practices is embedded throughout the curriculum. I recently visited Theberton Senior College because they're experiencing significant funding uncertainty after the federal funding of their new arrivals program for adults was cut last year by the previous government. To their credit, the South Australian state government stepped in to cover this funding shortfall, but unfortunately there's been no commitment to ongoing funding for the program in 2014. I met with the Principal, Kim Hebenstreit, and assistant principals from Theberton to discuss this unique program and to better understand what it has meant for the lives of many refugees and new arrivals to our country, most of whom are not allowed to work. It's a comprehensive, intensive English language immersion program for new arrivals to Australia, which aims to prepare students for living and working in the community and then, in some cases, pursuing further study. There's a focus on cultural interaction and understanding as well as academic achievement. It's unique in Australia. The course became so popular that people were coming from interstate directly from the airport to enrol with their boarding passes in their hand, and that was what the Principal, Kim, told me. But sadly, without a commitment for either state or federal funding in 2014, the 318 students who were enrolled in the program last year have been unable to continue their studies. These former students are living in the community, but now do not have anything to do, given that they're unable to work at this stage. Some of those who were enrolled were poised to enter Year 12 in 2014. Many are skilled workers, such as the diesel mechanic from Europe and the petrochemical engineer from Iran, who desperately want the chance to contribute in Australia. Attending Theberton, they were developing their English language skills in preparation for the time that they are permitted to work. Afghani women also attend Theberton. Some of these are mothers who've never learned to read or write. They've never had the opportunity to go to school in their own homeland, but now learning literacy and numeracy skills for the first time. Their lives enriched by the chance to learn in a safe and caring environment. They'll also be able to pass on their education and the advantages of that to their children, thus spreading the benefit. What a waste of potential if any one of these students is to become socially isolated due to a lack of English language skills or to not be able to pursue their hunger for learning and development. The shining light for the dedicated teachers and staff of Theberton is the way the Adelaide community has come together to support this wonderful and unique new arrivals program at Theberton until such time as funding can be restored. So after a call-out, the school has found at least 50 qualified and generous ESL, English as a Second Language professionals, who are willing to volunteer their time, with the result that some students will be able to access 6 hours of ESL per week outside of school hours, so the premises are available once the ordinary subjects and schooling has finished. Obviously, it's not the same as the former comprehensive program, which aimed to prepare students for living and working in the Australian community and for further study, but it does offer a ray of hope for those students who were bereft that they couldn't continue to attend the village that is Theberton Senior College. To me, it's a heartwarming example of just how kind many Australians are and what a welcoming, generous country we can be at heart. To run the program through to completion for the enrolled students as of December 2013 will require $3 million. The South Australian Government has yet to clarify if any further funding will be forthcoming. The principal of the college, Kim Hebenstreit, said it's the most inclusive and harmonious school environment he's ever encountered in almost 40 years of teaching. The students of Theberton are highly motivated individuals who have much to offer our community. The vast bulk of these students will live and work in South Australia. Even from a social cohesion perspective, it's far better if new arrivals are proficient in English and can participate fully within our broader community. There's currently a community-run petition directed to both the South Australian Government and the opposition in the lead-up to the South Australian election in 2 weeks, calling for reinstatement of the funding that's needed to ensure the completion of the education of the 318 people who were enrolled in December. I'll now turn to another 2 South Australian organisations that I want to talk about who are doing wonderful things to expand opportunities for South Australian young people who've been dealt a pretty tough hand in life. The first of these is called Time for Kids. It's a non-profit organisation fostering lifelong links between children or youth from a disadvantaged background and a nurturing second family. They take children as young as 18 months and match them with suitable families and mentors. These families often provide short-stay respite care to give these children a break and a chance to experience new experiences, new learning and opportunities that normally wouldn't come their way. In the words of the CEO of Time for Kids, Jennifer Duncan, Time for Kids pairs people who are equipped to navigate the system with those who are often victims of the system. In 2009, Time for Kids won a National Crime and Violence Prevention Award from the Federal Government and the Australian Institute of Criminology in recognition of the impact of their program in eliminating youth offending. As Flinders University Professor Mark Halsey said in evaluating the program, not every child who has a tough time at home, does badly at school, becomes violent, abuses drugs and alcohol and becomes socially withdrawn or commits crime. Similarly, not every child who ends up in permanent government foster care has a troubled life. But there is ample evidence to demonstrate that these are common factors associated with young people who are repeatedly incarcerated. Since 1960, Time for Kids has assisted more than 4,800 South Australian children, either through respite care or mentoring arrangements. But it's highly unique because the volunteers are not paid or reimbursed for any of the work they do. It's totally altruistic and totally voluntary. For many kids who are born into backgrounds of disadvantage, many of the adults they meet are professionally nice, social workers or others, where helping these kids is part of their work, part of their job. So it creates an amazing confidence boost to these young people when they learn that someone wants to spend time with them for free, for fun. Kids know the people that spend time with them through Time for Kids are there because they want to be, And that does wonderful things for the self-esteem and the sense of being valued for these children. Here's Matthew's story. Matthew's largely absent father battled with a severe mental illness, while his mother did the best she could to support Matthew and his 6 brothers and sisters alone. There's a beautiful book that's been compiled by Time for Kids, and Matthew's story is in that, so I take it from that book. Matthew says, "Most people take it for granted that we all make choices. The only difference, they say, is that some people make good choices and others don't. But I believe that there are people who don't make choices at all because they don't think they have any choice. That's probably how I would have been if I hadn't met my other family. Without Sarah, Greg and Ben, I know that as a child, and maybe even as an adult, I would never have camped under the stars, cooked marshmallows over the fire, caught my first fish, ridden on the cockle train or trekked around Granite Island. It was the day-to-day activities that influenced my life the most. It was far more than just a break for me. I saw the world in a different light just from spending time with them. They didn't go out of their way to do anything special. They were just there, being themselves, doing what they always did." With the support of his birth family and his support family, Matthew finished high school and went off to university, the only one of his siblings to do so. He completed a social work degree and he's now working in India with children in poverty. Over decades, Time for Kids has helped thousands of children like Matthew, and to their knowledge, not one of those children has come before the courts while they were with the Time for Kids program. Time for Kids can be immensely proud of the work they've done for more than 5 decades now, fostering caring mentor relationships to expand the horizons of those youth who might be at risk. The second organisation I'm going to talk about is connected with Youth Connections. It's employment options based in Mount Barker and Victor Harbor, and this organisation re-engages disadvantaged and disconnected young people with school, training or work. Each year it helps 1,700 South Australian young people to get back into education or employment. Many of the young people seen by the manager, John Coates, and his team are kids who've been out of school and work for at least several months. In some cases, these young people have ongoing challenges to their mental health or have been victims of bullying at school. Others simply lack the basic life skills they'll need to get a job. By the time some of these children are referred to Youth Connections, they've been disengaged from social settings for some time and can be anxious and withdrawn. Too often, our tendency with disengaged young people is to take punitive measures rather than practical ones. But the truth is, a big stick will not get children who have these sorts of challenges back to school. The beauty of the Youth Connections program is that it's tailored to need, so youth can stay a short time or as long as it takes. There's a flexibility with it. The team teach everything from the basic skills of shopping and opening a bank account to managing physical and mental health, as well as more targeted workplace skills. The dedicated team do a wonderful job of providing a safe space, and that's a really important concept here, a safe space where these young people feel welcome and safe to interact and develop with the staff and with each other. With pizza lunches and space for video games, the centre often operates like a family lounge room. But it's not just fun and games. This social interaction is serious business for isolated teenagers. And it works. That's the good news. A recent study showed 1 year after exiting Youth Connections, 94% of these youth are still in education or employment. And 2 years later, 81% are still learning or earning. The Youth Connections team are so well loved by their clients and so well respected by the local young people that many referrals come from the teens themselves or close friends. I want to share one moving story with you, almost too good to be true, that I heard about when I visited Youth Connections, and this was a young girl who was referred by Centrelink. She had very significant mental health issues. She had been involved with the child and adolescent mental health services for a long time, and she ultimately was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She was at times extraordinarily depressed, and she had engaged in self-harming. She'd been in and out of hospital, she'd been at several schools, and she was bullied at all of them. In fact, she went to a religious school and they performed an exorcism on her. She was kicked out of the last school before she got to Youth Connections because she took a knife to school. Because of her diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, many services were just not available to her. They wouldn't deal with her. I spoke to the manager, John Coates, and the team there, and after 18 months of patient work, this young woman was feeling much safer and doing extraordinarily well given that past history. She'd become involved with a crime prevention program with the police, and they were described by John as being absolutely fantastic. There had been some occasions when she'd slipped backwards and there'd been some tricky behaviour, so they checked in very regularly with her. As a result of her good experiences with the police, she is now engaged in a Justice Studies course. She had gone on and done some literacy and numeracy at TAFE. She's now in a Justice Study course. She's engaging other services, she's having work experience, and she's settling down, and she's recently moved out of home. Another 19-year-old man had a serious case of social withdrawal, and when he first came to Youth Connections, he would not engage with anyone. He would not speak, he would not engage, and when his mother wasn't there when she left, he was extremely shy and would sit quietly in the corner and not say anything for periods of time. They assisted him with a 10 weeks life skills course. He began to interact with the other young people at the service, and he now initiates conversations. They described him as feeling so safe in the service that he acts as if he actually owns the place. Unfortunately, the Commonwealth component of Youth Connections funding runs out at the end of this year, and there's no guarantee that it will be extended. I've written to the Education Minister, Christopher Pyne, urging him to renew the funding so that the wonderful work of Youth Connections can continue, because actually it's a huge investment. The alternative is unthinkable for some of these young people. They will be condemned to a life of social isolation. They will have extreme difficulty ever being able to engage in a meaningful work that is so important for all of us and our self-esteem and sense of worth. It's crucial we don't leave struggling or challenging youth behind, but continue to connect them with inspiring services with a strong track record, evaluated like the Youth Connections group. So in conclusion, I am lucky. I think I have a very fortunate job being able to meet people like this and poke my nose into their business, and often be welcome to do that, where they will share their endeavours and their success stories and their challenges with me. It makes me very proud to be a South Australian, knowing there are so many dedicated and passionate people working in my state for good in so many ways. I'm privileged to have met these organisations, and I will do all I can to support them to continue to thrive into the future.